All right, guys. So now we are going to go over use context, plain and simple, pretty easy to understand, especially when you start using React hooks with it. So what we're going to do first is before I go ahead and use context using our state here, I'm just going to show a simple example using a class name. So if you look at the application, you see that we have on the right side some numbers. We're just going to change that whole table to green, or at least the color of the text. So all we have to do is add a, let's see, a class right here. We say green, you'll see that it changes to green, easy. But now we want to get that from our context. And the way we do that is we have to have a provider around our application or around our component that we want to use the context in. So if we go all the way up here, we're going to import use context. We're also going to import create context. And we won't need this fragment because we're going to use our context to wrap our components. And now we're going to create a context right here, and we're just going to call this app context. We say create context. This can take a default value, but our default value is actually going to come from our application that we're going to give it. So now down here, looks like we have a little thing. Fragment is not defined, correct. So let's take that away. We're going to say app context right here, dot provider, and then app context dot provider. And this is going to be the thing that provides the value to our application. So now, if we say here, it needs a value prop added to it. And this is the value that's going to be passed to anything that uses this context or the consumer of this context. So we're going to give it a value of an object with a color, and that's going to be green like we did before. And if you look at our application, we don't have the green color yet. We have to actually get that from our use context, and that's where use context comes in to play. So if we go all the way up here to our numbers, and we're gonna make this return like this. And now we're gonna use context. So all we have to do is, what context returns back to you is the value inside of the provider, basically. So that value is going to be an object. So we're just going to take color out of that object, and we're going to say use context. And then all we have to provide here is the context that we want to use or that we are expecting. And it takes the closest context to it, or the closest one that is wrapping it. And for us, that's going to be our context right here. So we have app context here, and then we have our count right here. And it's just going to take this value, and we're going to use it like that. Now we're going to put it here, and we say color. And if you look at our application, you'll see that now our colors, our numbers are green, as well as the label and everything else. But we're not going to use context that way. We're going to use it in a different way, and we're going to use it to get our times off values and our times on values. So we're also going to use it for our on click and our is light on or illuminated here. If we go all the way down here, we're going to take this out because we don't need that anymore. And make sure I took it out of count already. Don't need it there. And we're actually going to go ahead and say times off here and times on here. Those are values that we're going to pass into our context. And let's go ahead and change these as well. Here we're going to get is light on. And we're going to get toggle light. We're going to change it to toggle light and not on click. We could make it on click. Actually, yeah, well, let's go ahead and make it on click. And then say use context and app context. And the same thing for our light switch or light element. Right, so now that we have that, we just need to go down here to our app and provide those values. So we have an on click. We're going to say on click, and that's going to be our toggle light. And then the rest of it is going to come from our use reduce function here is light on, times off, and times on. This is all going to be wrapped into an object. You can go ahead and extract that and say, let's just say, value, since it's just value there. We can say a context value. There we go. And then context value. All right, so there's going to be a few more things we need to do, and that is change this from props to not props at all. Use our context values. But then this props is not needed. This props is not needed. And I think that is it. Oh, we got here as well in our counts. And then we can take all these out and clean up our component here with no props passed in. Now this is not a very I guess you can say good way to use app context. You can see we still have the same functionality as we had before. App context or use context really is better if we have, say, props that we want to pass down multiple levels. So say that we made this function, this part of the application, a component itself, and then that component had another component that made this part of the component. So then we don't want to pass down times on from here to this component to this component. We just want to get, the number of times on by itself. So then that would be a better use case for use context. In this case, we're not passing that many props down, and we're not doing any spaghettiness of passing props down. That's it. It's pretty much use context in a nutshell. It's pretty useful, especially when it comes to having big things like authentication or user things that needs to be passed down throughout your application, and you don't want to pass it down from component to component to component. If you have any questions, definitely let me know. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button, and if you really liked it, subscribe button. I appreciate you guys watching, and let me know what you learned. Until the next line of code, guys. See ya.